everyone, in this video we will be doing the chapter number 10 of ACCA F2 Management Accounting, and the chapter's name is Sources of Data. So you might be wondering why have I skipped the chapters from like chapter number 2 to 9. I haven't skipped it, I will be covering them, but after I cover certain chapters. These are basic chapters which we are going to do in the starting, which are basically theoretical or you have done them in high school before. So I would like to begin with the easier chapters first, and then we will go to, nothing is tough in F2, and then we'll be going to a little bit advanced topics. So let's first start with those topics which we have already done a little bit in high school. So it's gonna be, it's gonna make you feel confident. Okay, the rules remain the same again. You need to have a paper, a pencil and a calculator, and you need to make notes as and when I'm explaining, and you need to also note down formulas if there are any. Also after that, in case you would like to solve the exam kit or watch other chapters, then you can check the description box below. I've linked all the playlists of F2, F2 exam kit, F2 study text, and F3 and F1 and maybe more. Okay, so in this chapter, we will basically be seeing the sources of data. So from where do we get data? So from where do we get information? From where do we seek out the data from? Where do you basically look for them and find them? So that is what we are going to see. What are the sources? There are various sources, internal, external. So we'll be seeing all that. Okay. So we have internal and external data. We'll come to that. And then we have something which is known as sampling. And I'm sure that you must have done something related to sampling in your high school. And then we have something big data. So this is a new topic, big data. So since the technology is advancing on a exponential rate, we have something which is known as big data. For example, our phone. Let's take an example of a cell phone. It stores a lot of information, right? Even when you delete, all of the information is still there in your phone. It is there in some kind of a database. So if you think about the police or the FIR or all the CBI and all of those institutions, where do they get the information? They track your cell phones and they find out the information even after you've deleted them, right? So all of this is possible only because of big data. So we'll be seeing all of these in detail now. So first of all, let's talk about what data is. Data is a sort of information. Don't get confused. In the following chapter, we will also see the difference between data and information. But to just explain the meaning of data, data is basically what we assume it to be is information, right? That's how we perceive data. Data is presented in the form of information. We have primary data and secondary data. So by the name, it suggests. So primary data, what exactly is primary data? It is obtained directly from first-hand sources, okay? So primary data is when I am seeking information. So it is a first-hand information. For example, right now I am teaching you. Let's take an example. I'm teaching you. Okay. Now think about it for a second. If you make notes of my data, you make notes of what I've explained and you explain to your friend from that notes. So now that is secondary, right? Because I'm not directly explaining to your friend. You are explaining to your friend from the notes which you have prepared. So that is secondary data. But now if you are studying directly from me and if I'm just explaining to you from my own notes, let's say, that would mean it is primary data. Okay, so primary means first. So primary data usually means first-hand data. So what are the examples of first-hand data? Surveys. So when I take a survey from a person, if I take your interview, it is going to be a first-hand information. Observation and experimentation. It is the data that has... So it is the data which hasn't been published previously. So when you talk about primary data, it is the first-hand data. So this information is coming into place for the first time ever. It hasn't been published anywhere before. It is derived from a new or original research study and collected at the source, such as in marketing. Primary data is any data which is used solely for the purpose for which it was originally collected. So for the original reason you collected, you have used it only for that. Okay, so that is what is primary data now. Now let's come and see what secondary data is. Secondary data is the data that has been previously collected or researched. So this is not a first-hand information. This is not a new information. For example, let's now see the same situation in another perspective. I'm teaching you from Kaplan, right? Now Kaplan has made this textbook using various periodicals, using various government magazines, using the IFRS and everything. So Kaplan is basically a secondary data source, right? Because it has compiled everything from previously researched stuff. Now let's see the sources of secondary data. Internet. So everything which is available on the internet is secondary data. Why? Because it has been published before and it has been researched before. Libraries, company records, newspaper, governments and banks. The data collected is useful as it allows the researcher to see other opinion on the area of study, but care must be taken that the data is reliable or accurate. So when we talk about secondary data, we shouldn't be trusting it very easily. Why? Because we don't know its original source. We don't know where it came from. If it's primary, we are sure we know the origin of the data. We know from where it came, right? Because it is first hand. But when we're talking about secondary data, we cannot trust it so easily. Secondary data is the data that has already been collected for some other purpose but can also be used for the purpose in hand. So I hope you understood the difference between secondary and primary. An important distinction is made here since information collected for one purpose by a business and then at a later date used again for another purpose would no longer be primary data. Take a moment and read it again. So, information collected for one purpose by a business. Okay, so at that time it is a primary data, right? Because you collected it for only one purpose. Now, using the same data for another purpose. So in that case, it would not be primary data anymore. Okay? Okay, now let's start with the illustration. Decide which of the following are primary and secondary. Information from clock cards when used for making up wages. Think about it. Think about it. Information from clock cards when used for making up wages. This is primary data. Why? Because the clock cards are made so that we can calculate wages. That is the purpose for which it has been made. So then this is primary data. Data from a government publication on the toy industry used by a new toy shop to determine which items to stock. Again, what did we talk about it? Government data are secondary because they collect data from various things. So this is secondary data. Government statisticians collate data from various sources and the data is used in a variety of ways. Expense claim form submitted by sales rep used to estimate the car mileage they have. Expense claim form submitted by the sales reps used to estimate the car mileage they have traveled. Again. So think about the initial purpose of the data. Why was the data collected in the first place? They were expense claims. So they weren't in the first place, in the first hand, it wasn't for measuring the car mileage. So this is a different purpose, right? So that is why it is the secondary data. Results of an election opinion poll published in a newspaper. Think about it. Take a moment and think about it. Okay. So now there are two perspectives in which you can see the same question. The first thing is, let's see their answer. This is primary data since the data was collected specifically for the purpose. So it was collected specifically for the election results. And if you think it is secondary data, you are probably thinking that the results were being used to predict the result of the election. So there are two perspectives to see the same thing. Okay? Don't worry, whatever question you get in your exam is going to be straightforward. Moving on. Now let's see what are the limitations of using the secondary data. What are the problems which occur whenever you use secondary data? So primary data is preferable to secondary data. Why? We have discussed, because it is collected for a specific purpose. Secondly, it is first-hand information. So when you have first-hand information, you can easily trust. So when I say trust, it is reliable in nature, right? Because you have proof that you yourself conducted the research. Now, what are the problems with secondary data? Let's see that. The data has been collected by someone else, so you haven't done it, so you can't really trust it. There is no control over how it was collected, so you have no idea what methods have been used to find and come to that conclusions. If a survey was used, was a suitable questionnaire used? Was a large enough sample taken? Was enough data collected? Was it reputable? So now these are the things which come into place when you're talking about the secondary data. So we don't really know the answers to these questions, so we can't really trust them completely. Is the data up to date? So how will you know that if it is up to date? How will you know that if you can rely on it for this year? Data quickly becomes out of date. So with each passing day, with each passing minute, new data keeps coming into picture. So you need to keep it updated, right? So if it's not updated, then it's not going to give you accurate results. For example, people's consumer tastes and changes and prices may fluctuate. So data keeps changing and people keep evolving, people's thinking keeps evolving, and that is going to also take a big, toll on the marketing sector or on the business sector. You need to keep in touch with the people's choices and preferences. The data may be incomplete, so you don't know if the data was complete or it was incomplete. Certain groups of people are sometimes omitted from the published data. So sometimes when they take these surveys, let's say you're taking a survey regarding poverty. I'm just giving you an example. And if you want to, let's say, find a percentage of poverty, and you are taking a survey for the same, if you are not including the people who are living in backward regions, if you're not including the people who are living in the poverty stricken region, let's take an example that we conduct this survey only in a metropolitan city. Do you think your results are going to be accurate in that case? Because you have omitted the most important sector using which you were able to actually find the actual poverty figure in the country. So you need to make sure that you are including the entire population, or you are including all the target audience or whoever is concerned with your study. So when you take secondary data, you don't know if they have included, if they have incorporated everybody or not. So that's what they meant, that when they said that certain groups of people are sometimes omitted from the published data. So that can give you false information, right? For example, do you know which groups are included in the unemployment figures? What is the data? Is it actual, seasonally adjusted, estimated, or projection? The reason for collecting the data may be unknown. Statistics published on motor cars may include or exclude three-wheeled cars, vans, and motor caravans. Readers need to know which categories are included in data. So these are the various kinds of limitations which come when we're talking about secondary data. If secondary data is to be used, these questions need to be answered. Sometimes the answers will be published with the data itself, or sometimes it may be possible to contact the people who collected the data itself. If not, users must be aware of the limitations of making decisions based on information which is produced from secondary data. So it is always the best to conduct the research by yourself and to come up with the data by yourself. In that way, it will be reliable in nature and you can answer all the questions. But then if that's not possible, then whenever you are publishing your document, you need to mention what the limitations are. Sources of secondary data are numerous and can be broadly categorized as two forms. So the two broad categories of secondary data, those produced by individual organizations and those by government. So either either the individual organizations have published the data, or else the government have published the data. So these are the two broadly categorized sources of secondary data. Take a moment to revise this and then we'll move on. Now we come to another way you can bifurcate data: nominal and ordinal data. Let's talk about what nominal and ordinal data is. Before that, let's begin with ordinal data itself. So ordinal data is a data type with a set order or a scale to it. So there is a particular scale to it, group. Okay. However, this order does not have a standard scale on which the difference in variables is measured. For example, customer satisfaction survey. So we have a particular age group to see. We have happiness levels, we have the Likert scale, we have results. So everything is quantified in a way, right? We can say it in a number format. It is quantified. We can measure it somewhat on a scale. But when we talk about nominal data, see the examples. Blood type. So we have various categories of blood type, but we can't measure it. We can't measure it, right? But we know that there are different categories: B positive, O positive, right? Gender. We can't measure it, but we can say it's either a male or a female or other, right? So we have categories in that. It's not quantified in number. We just have various categories. Eye color: blue, green, black, gray. So you can't quantify it again. So if you can quantify a data, that comes in ordinal data. If you cannot quantify a data, that comes in nominal data. Hope you understood. So that is the categorical data. Moving on. Okay. Now we have a discrete data and a continuous data. Discrete and continuous data. This is now another bifurcation of the same. So let's talk about what discrete data is. Discrete is non-continuous and continuous is continuous, obviously. So let's first say continuous data. Continuous data is unbroken data that has no gaps. Continuous data can take on any value within a range. For example, time or distance. Continuous data is measured. Okay. So now when we talk about continuous data, it is something which has no gap in between. It does not end anywhere. Continuous. It is continuous on a prolonged period, right? It does not end. It has no sort of gaps between it. Now that is what is known as a continuous data. So it has a range. Now when we talk about what discrete data is, let's see that. Discrete data is non-continuous data. Discrete data can only take certain values. For example, the number of students taking a course. So it is going to be 10 people or 20 people or 30 people. So we have a particular number of people who are taking up the course. It can be continuous in nature, right? So we cannot really have a half student in the course, right? We cannot really have a 1.5 students in the course. It's either going to be 1 or 2. We won't be having that half feature. So there is a gap between them, right? So that is why we call it the discrete data. Now if we're talking about time, 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. If you want half, you have 1:30. So there is no gap there, right? It is unbroken in nature. For example, time. So that is a continuous data. So that is the difference between discrete data and continuous data. Quickly, let's revise what nominal data and ordinal data is. Nominal data is can't be quantified. Ordinal data can be quantified. Let's do the test understanding one. Take a moment and try to solve it by yourself, then I will discuss. Let me see how many pages are left to. Okay, let's start. So we have to categorize whether they are discrete or continuous. What is discrete? It is not continuous. What is continuous? It is never ending and has no gaps. Age of 5 years. Age of 5 years. Now what do you mean by age of 5 years. Think about it. A person can be 5 years. A person can be 5.5 years also. Right? I can be 5 years one day also. So there is no gap in that. So it is continuous. Time of 2.5 hours. What did I tell you about time? It is continuous. Output of 1200 kg. I can have 12,000.1 kg. I can have 12,005 kg. I can have 12,806 kgs. Anything is possible, so there is no break. Continuous. Output of 5,000 units. Now we are talking about units. I can have 1 unit. I can have 2 units. But can I have 1.5 units? No. You can have a half unit. Can I say that I have one iPad and I have half iPad? No, I can't say that. But can I say that I have goods of 1 kg and I have goods of 1.5 kg? Yeah, I can. So that is continuous. But when we're talking about specific units, it is discrete. I hope now you have understood the concept of discrete and continuous. Moving on. Now we have descriptive analysis and inferential analysis. Okay, before we start with this, I know that it's getting a little bit lengthy and it might be a little bit boring because it is highly theoretical in nature. But this is we just have like 2 to 3 chapters which are like this. All of the MA chapters are gonna be really interesting and they're gonna be really, practical in nature. So just do these 2 chapters. Okay, take a moment and read this, then I'll explain. Okay, a descriptive analysis gives you an idea of the distribution of the data, helps you detect anomalies, and enables you identify relationship between variables. Examples include histograms, frequency tables, bar charts, and calculation of mean, median, mode, and standard deviation. Inferential analysis uses a random sample of data taken from a population and make inferences about the population. Descriptive analysis summarizes the characteristics of a data set. Inferential analysis allows you to test a hypothesis. What did you understand? So when we're talking about descriptive analysis, it helps you find out anomalies. It helps you come up with a data set and it helps you to identify relationship between the variables, right? Like mean, median, mode, histogram and everything. But if you want to test the hypothesis, when I say test the hypothesis, I mean that let's say you would like to test whether a particular research or particular thing, which particular data, you would like to test if it's actually going to work, right? So in such situations where you want to test a product or where you want to test a hypothesis, you use inferential. Why do you use inferential analysis? Because it will give you the hypothesis testing and it will give you the actual response to your product. Okay, so descriptive analysis summarizes the characteristics. Inferential analysis allows you to test a hypothesis. Moving on, we have data sources. Now, what are we talking about? What do I mean by data sources? What are the sources from where I obtain my data again? So the first thing which we have is a machine or a sensor data. Sensor data is the output from a device that detects and responds to some type of input about a physical environment. So sensor data is output from a device that detects and responds to some input from the physical environment. So let's take an example. We all have gas in our homes, right? We all have cylinders, gas cylinders or gas pipelines. And you have meters on it. And those meters basically give you a number based on the sensor. So the sensor always reacts to the physical environment and comes up with a particular result or a number. So that is what they are talking about. This kind of data is collected in real time and the number and timing of observations can be adapted to suit the requirements. Machine or sensor data can be collected automatically or manually. The quality is dependent on the level of sophistication of the sensor to take accurate measurements. Sensor data can range from measurements taken from robots in production lines to location data from a mobile phone to smart meters recording electrical or gas usage. So today I want to send my location, I want to detect my location to my home. So how does my phone automatically, how does the GPS in my phone automatically find out where I am currently? All that is due to sensor, right? So now the first way, the first source using which you can collect the data is sensor. Now they are referring to machine as sensor only. Okay. Now we have transactional data. Transactional data. Let's read that. Transactional data relates to transactions that take place as an organization conducts its business. So in a business organization, various transactions keep taking place, right? You can collect information from the various transactions that have been taking place. Obviously, right? So large retailers, what do I mean by retailers? A retail store, a shopkeeper or a shop owner, basically a person who runs a store, a person who runs a business. Large retailers generate large volumes of data on a regular basis, particularly transaction data. Every day they buy and sell goods. Every day there are various sorts of transactions which keep taking place in their books, right? Each transaction consists of one or more items of data: product ID, prices, payment information. The quality of data produced from business transactions is related to the ability to gather representative observations and to process them in an appropriate manner. So now let's talk about what are the examples of transactional data. Purchases made by a customer, invoices that are raised, payments which are made, and stock market prices. So now these are the ways. So as and when a transaction takes place, data keeps changing, right? Now these are transactional data. The next one we have is a human or social data. So humans are social beings, right? So that's why we are referring to social data as human data. So social data is information that social media users share publicly. So when I am using the social media and I am sharing a news piece in my social media, so other people are receiving that media, right? Other people are receiving the data. So social media companies such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter can be used by companies to gain information on user behaviors. So you know that there are various surveys, there are various YouTube advertisements, there are various sorts of ways using which a company can get information regarding his customers' behavior. Now that is what is known as human or social data. Social media networks analyze this data to learn more about the users and connect them to appropriate content. So if you think about it, what happens? If I went on Google today, just try it by yourself, and I searched for hair care products. The next day, I'm watching a random video on YouTube and an advertisement pops up which is talking about a hair shampoo. That happens because they know that you search something related to hair care on your Google. So this is the kind of thing. By your search engines and all of that, they get the human data or the social data, and then they start recommending you the products if they think you are fit in their target audience. Examples include posts on Facebook, tweets on Twitter, and photos on Instagram. Understood? Okay. Now we have internal sources of information. What do you mean by internal? Internal means something that is happening inside your organization, something which is happening within your own organization. So the first thing we have is the accounting system. So we studied in F3 also. All of the organizations have their own accounting system. The accounting system will collect data from source documents such as invoices, timesheets, and journal entries. You know that you prepare the financial statements of a business. you know that you make the balance sheet, you make the statement of financial position, you make the statement of profit and loss. So you can collect information, you can collect data from that, right? You obviously can. The data will be sorted and analyzed by a coding system by type of expense, department, manager, and job. Reports of direct and indirect costs compared to budgets may be produced at regular intervals. By doing that, you can help the managers to plan and you can help them to control costs. What do you mean by control costs? Your profit should always be more than costs, right? That is what they are talking about. Ad hoc reporters may be produced to help managers make specific decisions. Recall from your BT paper, what was ad hoc? Ad hoc means a person working for you for a period of time only or for a specific project to be completed. Okay, that is what was my ad hoc. Consider the examples which are listed below. Sales analyzed by product will help management to assess the patterns of demand, right? When you analyze sales, you will understand what kind of demand is there. The same information will help plan production and inventory levels. So you can use the same sales information which was given in your financial statements, accounting statement, and use it to make decision for something else. So that is how you can use the accounting information in your management. Production information will enable the organization to plan its requirement for the raw materials, labor, and machine hours. Information on material, labor, and other costs will allow organization to set costs of its products. So we use the accounting information in order to come up with the management information. This will be the basis for a budgetary control. In the context of long-term strategic decision making, the sales analysis given above may help the manager to assess future product strategies. So by taking the information from our accounting statements, you can be taking decisions for the future. An aged receivable analysis report. You remember what aged receivables were, right? How we are keeping a track and following up on how old our receivables are. Debt collection. So now we use the aged receivable analysis, and using that a credit control manager will take decisions. So this is how you can use the information from our accounting statements in order to come to some decision. Figures for wastage rates or product reject rates may allow management to reach decisions on the product quality aspect of organizations' operations. Okay. Payroll system. Now, what is a payroll system? The payroll system may provide information concerning detailed labor costs. How much hours are given, for how much hours they are working, and how much money we are paying for them. So hours paid may be analyzed into productive or non-productive time, such as training, sick leave, holiday, and idle time. Labor turnover by department or manager may be analyzed and help them. So we know how we can use the payroll system to find out other systems. Strategic planning system. Now you remember what strategic is. We saw in chapter 1, right? Strategic basically refers to the top level. So the most important and crucial decisions. The strategic planning system may provide information relating to the organization's objectives and targets. Assumptions relating to the external environment may be detailed. Details of the organization's capital investment program and product launch program may also be recorded here. Some of this information will be commercially sensitive and only accessed by senior managers in the organization. I don't think there's anything to explain. Okay, now we have some benefits and some disadvantages or limitations of internal sources. So benefits are that it is readily available. Data can be easily sorted and analyzed because it is of our company and we have already done this. Reports can be easily produced when required. So whenever I require, I can get the report. Data relates to the organization concerned. Now, what are the limitations of the internal sources? data may need to be further analyzed. So sometimes management decisions, management accountants, if they want to take a more detailed decision for something, in such situations they need to analyze the financial data on a deeper, way. So that is what they are trying to discuss. Okay, so I'm stopping this video here because I understand that this is really theoretical and boring, and I don't want you to not understand the rest of the chapter. So I'm stopping it over here. We've just finished the internal data sources. Okay, in the next video we will be doing the external data sources, and after doing that we'll be doing sampling and big data. So I hope you're understanding this chapter. In case you have any doubts, then please drop them in the comment section below. Thank you.